When designing in CAD, it's common to have two parts mate together. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to create a component with reference to another component. So let's get into it. In the last lesson, we finished having a completed box for our Arduino. In this one, we're going to use the top of that box to create a reference to create a new component, or the lid. What we're going to end up having to do is create a joint to lock that lid down, or it's going to be floating in space. Additionally, we're going to go over a lot more design considerations. PCBs create heat. We got to get that heat out of there, so we're going to create some ventilation. We're going to create that hole for the reset button, as well as wire out options. So let's jump into CAD and get started. So we have that bottom box assembly here with the Arduino inside of it. What we want to do is create a lid that's on top of this surface. So what we're going to do is create a sketch on that surface here. And by selecting that surface, what we do is we automatically get the projection that we're looking for. You can kind of see here that I have those two profiles that I can select. So now I can go straight to extrude. We're going to come up to extrude that outer ring, and we need to click this inner ring as well. And we're going to extrude this up. We'll call it 0.125 to keep the same wall thickness all the way around. Now, one big thing that we're going to be doing here is that in the operations section, we're going to go to joint, and we're going to select new component instead of new body. If you are having questions about which one to choose, go back to chapter 1 and see the video on components or bodies. Okay, so we're going to select OK here. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and show our analysis. We're going to slide this over. We're going to see that we now have this purple area here, and that's showing that lid area. One thing that we don't have right now is we don't have anything that locates that lid. So it's just floating around on top of that box. We need something that actually goes inside of it to create that location. So going back into CAD here, let's go ahead and create that locator extrusion on the inside. A quick way to do this, and we can leave the analysis up, is I can go back into my sketches and I can show that last sketch that we just created. Now you can see here it's kind of highlighted here. I can go ahead and click extrude and extrude this. We're going to pull this down. We'll just say 50 thousandths of an inch. So it's already there. One big thing that we do right now though is that if we go ahead and extrude that going down now, it's going to connect both the bottom assembly and the top assembly, because we're going to join everything together. We only want to join to the top lid, so we're going to go ahead and hide that bottom box. So we'll hide that bottom box. We can see here we end up having a little leg sticking down. We're going to click OK. Now if I get rid of my analysis, remember that the analysis doesn't actually affect the part at all. You can see that I actually got the whole entire thing in effect. But if I end up putting back on my bottom box, turning it back on, I can see that I have a solid structure. We'll go back to analysis again. We can see that leg is sitting inside of there, and there's two individual components. So what we have now though is we have a component on top of another component. If I select this lid, I can drag that all over the place. They're not actually connected at all. And this is kind of when you create two different components within the same file, this is what ends up happening. So if what we want to do is go back and create a joint. If you guys haven't seen chapter 2, lesson 2, go ahead and review that. That's when I kind of talk about joints. On this, there's a handful of different ways we can do this. What we really want is just the two surfaces and 2 points that need to come in contact together. So I'm going to just do an easy way of just selecting this side here. Actually, let's go ahead and turn off analysis, make it a little bit easier. I want this point down here to come in contact with the mid and this point here. Now, it flipped over the part. This is a pretty easy thing to correct, where we can come over here to our drop-down dialog box and select flip. That just rotates the part back over, and we can click OK. Now, since we have the Arduino locked in space to the origin of the joint that we originally created, and we have the bottom box that is joined to the Arduino, and the lid is joined to the bottom box, everything is locked in the space. We have a nice rigid design here that we can work with. Right now, everything's ready to go. What we want to do is do 2 or 3 more modifications to this part before we go ahead and get ready to print. Now the first thing is that this little leg that we created sticking down to locate the lid is exactly the same size as the hole that's in the top of the lid. What I want to do is I want to just create a little bit of a space there for us to have a little bit of a slip fit. Now there's a tool up here in the modify section called press pull. If I select on this face here, I can just do the one face. I can say minus 0.020, and we can go around and select all of the different faces here. Ooh. Okay, we're gonna go back in here, select all of our faces here. Now that we have all of them selected, then we can do the minus 0.05 or 0.02. That ends up giving us that little bit of space that we want to have for that slip fit. Go back into analysis. You can see how I always flip back and forth between my analysis to see what I kind of got going on the inside. Okay, now that we have all of that done, we want to start going over the different things that we need to have for design considerations. Now the first thing is that this is pretty much a solid box now. And so all the heat's going to be trapped inside of it. So let's create some ventilation here in the lid by creating a single slot on the top. So we're going to select that top surface, create a sketch, and then we're going to go in here and we're going to create a slot. Now I'm going to do a center point slot so that it's a little bit easier for us. We're going to select that origin area here so that it's automatically located in the center and rotate it out. The slot tool is really, really helpful. It's very fast. What you can do is just automatically select this. Let's give it a radius of 0.125. And let's give it a length of 1.75. And we have that pattern there. Now, one thing that we can do is we can either pattern the sketch or we can pattern the extrusion. I kind of always recommend doing the extrusion because what ends up happening is you have to select a lot. If you end up doing, say, an array of 10 by 10 of these slots, then to extrude them, you're going to have to select it 100 times. Whereas if you do the extrusion once and you pattern out the extrusion, what you end up seeing is you only have to do that one time. So let's just kind of show what I'm talking about here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut down through that lid. And we're going to end up showing this analysis. Make sure I'm not cutting anything on the inside. Everything is clear. We're going to click OK. All right, now I have that pad or that hole in the top of the lid. Let's go ahead and create a pattern of that slot. So we're going to come back up here to our drop-down menu, and we're going to select features out of this because what we just did was a feature, that extrude cut. We're going to select that extrude cut, and then we're going to select this axis here. That'll allow me to drag multiples over. Now, when we kind of come down here, we can see that we have a distance of 0.1, or we'll just change this to 1, and we're going to end up changing this to symmetric, so it puts them on both sides. When we do that, actually, we end up having it kind of come spaced out too much. So let's just adjust this back down a little bit to something we want to looks a little bit more visually appealing. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and turn back off analysis. You can see that I have those 3 slots. What I was talking about earlier is that if I did the sketch and I patterned out the sketch in the same way, I would have had to click extrude 3 times. If you get into a lot larger numbers, it's a lot more of a pain. All right, we have a great way for heat to get out of our Arduino now. Let's go ahead and create that hole that we need for the reset button. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch on that top surface again, but the first thing I'm going to do is hide my lid. And on our crude Arduino that we had, we can hide our sketches here. On that crude Arduino that I had, I ended up having a hole that went through just as a reference point. So what we're going to do is just select project. We're going to project just that hole up, select OK, and then we're going to re-show our lid. I have that hole now here, ready to go. Let's just go ahead and extrude that through. And we could always use a wire or a little screwdriver or something to press our Arduino later using that reset button. So we have our reset hole. The last thing we're going to do is create a little slot on the back of this part for our wires to come out of it so that we can actually use whatever the Arduino is doing for us. We're going to come back here. We're going to select on the back box here, but I'm going to actually create a sketch that ends up overlapping the two different components. Now, in previous lessons, we've talked about how you need to hide certain components to not cut them. And this one is going to be a great example to show how those two interact with the extrude process. So we're going to go to slot. We're going to do our center slot again. We're going to select that midpoint on that line here. So we're going to do our constraints midpoint. We're going to select that line and our point here. And we're going to bring this down so that it's a nice small slot so our wires can stick out. Let's just say 0.125 again and 1 inch. Now, when I extrude this, I'm extruding through both the lid and the bottom assembly. So when I pull this back, if I go to this objects to cut and I drop this down, you can see here I have both the bottom and the top component. If I deselect this, you can kind of see here that this area right here reappears. So I can select what objects I want to cut. I can also hide those objects if I don't want them to be cut, and it's just a little bit easier that way. So let's just extrude this back a ways, say 1/2 inch. Just create a little void in there, and we're going to select OK. So we have this cool little slot in here. This is not machinable at all, but what it is 3D printable. So this is a great idea of like a DFM aspect. Okay, now that we have everything together on our 3D box here, we're kind of done. We're ready to 3D print. So that's the end of this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to make changes to this box though and show when things break, how to fix them. So we'll see you on the next one.